All right, welcome back into FSP Fantasy Sports. Today, Matt and Joe with you here, and I always like to pull back the curtain. You know, right during the break, right before we came on the air, Joe was just asking me, hey, what's going on with the stock market and coins and all this and all that? And, it's funny how we get to a point in our lives where we're all looking for that hit, right? That get rich, this stock, that coin, that. Why not wagering? Why not? If we as a group collectively know just a bit more or even just enough and we enjoy it, that's the thing. When we as humans are passionate about something, we're really good at stuff. It's great. If we enjoy it and we know about it, well, there's the big hit. You find a plus 250, a plus 350, find a nice parlay. What's the difference between that and waiting out a stock? So, Joe, it's a great question to ask. I'm glad we can bring the conversation forward as we move into ADP wars. We want to talk about this guy's going at this number, this guy's going at this number. Would you rather? And we're starting in a really amazing place. At 27 sits Ronald Acuna. Maybe you've heard of him. At 29 sits Jackson Merrill, sophomore slump. Joe, the floor is yours.
Look, Jackson Merrill could have a sophomore slump. He is just 21 years old, an incredible year last year. I have to credit my co-host at Fantasy Rose MLB, the Welsh, who was at a lot of the spring training games last year. He's a big prospect guru guy. He hosts a prospect show, a podcast. And he told me last year, he's like, hey, Jackson Merrill, he could be rookie of the year. And I was like, who? What are you talking about? He's like, just watch Jackson Merrill. Well, 156 games, 24 homers, 90 RBI, 16 steals, 292. It's a pretty good season for Jackson Merrill. A lot of people are saying, okay, now can he repeat it? And I think that's the concern people have. And then you have Ronald Acuna basically going right next to him. Now, we all know what Ronald Acuna is. At his height, he's a 40-70 guy. The interesting thing is the conversation we've had before. In fact, George Kurtz and I were arguing about it last week, which was George saying he was concerned they wouldn't come back and run. And I said, well, that's not what happened last time he came back from an ACL. Last time, it was the power that slumped. He had only 15 home runs, but he had 30 steals in 119 games or 112 games, whatever it was. And that was before the rules changes. So there was no problem with Ronald Acuna stealing bases when he returned from an ACL. Now he's got 2 remade ACLs. I'm not worried about it. What hurts you with Ronald Acuna is head-to-head leagues where, the first 6 weeks of the season, if it's a deep league, a 14, 15-team league, the replacement value is hard. If you're in a 10-team league, I'll take Ronald Acuna all day over Jackson Merrill. I will find a way to patch together a couple weeks. Injuries could happen to Jackson Merrill, and he could miss a month of the season for all I know. As long as I have a plan and I'm a savvy drafter, I know that I could take somebody to fill that void of Acuna for a month. The waiver wire in April is always bountiful. We always get these guys that kind of come out of nowhere and have good months of April, never to be heard from again. I can find some offense there. I can't find somebody with 40-70 sort of skill set. And again, is he going to miss the first month, maybe 2 of the season? That's where it gets a little dicey in the deeper leagues. So 12-team leagues, depends on your risk tolerance. Jackson Merrill's safer in a 14, 15-team league scenario. That's my breakdown of these two. Who would you rather have, Acuna or Jackson Merrill?
Let me bring some sobriety to this thing, and that's a great word to use with this crew. Ronald Acuna is better than anyone you or I know. Ronald Acuna with 2 repaired ACLs, I don't care if it's dental floss and bubble gum, is still better than anyone you or I know. And I don't understand this in the fantasy community, in the wagering community. Dude, it's Ronald Acuna. Earlier we did a segment on Pablo Lopez underrated. Like, he's still real. I understand he's not Mike Trout and that bloom is way off the rose. But this is still Ronald Acuna. Why do we forget about how great this player is? And come July and August, when it really matters, we're going to go, oh, yeah, Ronald Acuna. I want him on my team, even if I have to sit and wait. And here's the interesting thing, though, about these ADP wars here is that when you're looking at 27, 28, 29, 31, 33, 35, 36, you have some choices to make because when you come back on the turn, depending on where you are, a lot of these players aren't going to be here. Let's go to third base now. We'll stay with Atlanta and San Diego, actually. Austin Riley at 31, Manny Machado at 33. Now, I prefer the offensive ecosystem of Austin Riley based off of what I just said, the potential of what Acuna means. Joe, where do you land?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Austin Riley was coming off some monster seasons, right? You look at 2022, 38 homers, 93 RBI, 23, 37 homers, 97 RBI. And then last year, an awful start. Then he finally got going, and then he got hurt. So I think collectively Atlanta just was, at times just stuck in the mud, right? Matt Olson struggled at times. Ozzy Albies was hurt. Ronald Acuna only played 40-something games. So I feel like Atlanta just never got out of its own way. Just so many injuries, so many issues. So as long as everything's going in the right direction for Atlanta, I tend to agree with you because I think the upside for Austin Riley is a little bit higher. But I will say this, even though you might be giving up 5 or 6 potential home runs with, taking Manny Machado, I think the floor of Manny Machado is a little bit safer if you are concerned about what was going on wrong with Austin Riley last year, because it was just wrong. And Manny Machado is just Manny Machado every single year. You're going to set your watch to 3,100. That's going to be where it is. And I think it's a lot closer than some other people might think. Well, I mean, they are close in ADP, but still, it's clear that most people just prefer Austin Riley. But I think it's a little bit more of a conversation. Matt, I'm curious, like, you want just the steady Eddie of Manny Machado or the slight upside of Austin Riley with the slight downside of the player you saw last year, which was not good for most of the season?
So I'll admit here that when I'm playing season-long fantasy, a lot of times I want to be excited about the team. I want to be in on the team. Now, I like the Padres, but from a different perspective. I like them from pitching. I like them from bullpen. I really don't like a lot of their bats, so I'm not excited about it. I need to be excited about it. So that's why I like Austin Riley, because I just like the team around him. I mean, my gosh, yeah, you can make the case for what's around Machado, but when you look around what's healthy and around Riley, I like his offensive ecosystem far better. And it brings me to this next grouping here of 35 or 36, and it's pitchers now. It's Corbin Burns, newly with Arizona, or it's Garrett Crochet with Boston. So which offensive ecosystem do I like better? I want to be in on Boston this year. We were talking about now with the Cole injury, what that means for the Red Sox overall. I'm going to take Garrett here over Corbin Burns, but what's your thought?
I'm in agreement with you. Corbin Burns faded a little bit in the second half for me. He is still a very good pitcher, a fantasy ace, but I keep going back to the same thing. It was like, I feel like I can find Pablo Lopez a few rounds later, and it's not that different. So I like the landing spot for him. It's a good lineup. He's going to get lots of run support. But Garrett Crochet's strikeout potential is off the chart. Last year, in 146 innings, that K per 9 was 12.88. One of the best investments I think you can make right now, if you look in most markets here, Garrett Crochet is at usually the third or even fourth guy on the board to lead the league in strikeouts. Now, the concern is the innings, right? Well, how many innings does he throw? But I think you can say the same thing about Paul Skeens, who's the leader at plus 350. Garrett Crochet is at plus 850 to lead the league in strikeouts. I will take Garrett Crochet. I'm curious to see what it looks like when you have, when you change your socks from white to red and all of a sudden there's expectations and the media is different. And if you have a bad start, the fans get on you a little bit more, right? This is a very different environment that he's going to, where there's a lot more expectations. And I think those expectations are going to be exasperated now that you have the Garrett Cole injury and the Yankees looking like they're a little bit on the uneasy ground. So Crochet to me has all that upside. If you are somebody that desperately wants to get in the pitching market but doesn't want to pass on offense, Garrett Crochet is your guy in the third round. Lock it up and just take him, be aggressive in the third round, because I think that's the guy that could match Skubal and Skeens, but at the end of the day isn't going to cost you a Vlad Guerrero or a Lindor or Fernando Tatis in your lineup.
All right, with the time that we have left, let's go to ADP 43 or 44. And Joe, I'm going to turn you loose here because the name on the back of the jersey is what's drawing people. You could build Jose Altuve much later in your drafts. It's Jose Altuve at 43 or Oniel Cruz has dual position eligibility now at 44. Where do you land?
Well, both of these guys, right? Infielders moving to the outfield. Altuve is going to move into the outfield. He'll be outfield eligible in most leagues by the end of April. But I got to tell you, at 35 years old, with Altuve changing positions, sometimes that doesn't always go well. I'm going to go with the younger guy here, the athlete that is Oniel Cruz, and look for him to build on the upside. He's not going to give me the batting average. He's going to have more swing and miss. I think the power speed upside is greater than Altuve. We come back to the pitchers. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that ring. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of
15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia giving you everything you need in order to dominate. As Joe enters into the world of statins and blood thinners, we enter into the world of late round starting pitching. During the break, Joe was sharing some of his blood work numbers with us, and we were having conversations. I just want to say out to the world, I'm not going to give you numbers. Don't think that a lot of the numbers that the medical community tells us are the numbers. There's some deeper tests that you can do. So we all pray for Joey P's health. We want that. Let's go for some late round starting pitching, Joe.
But you can always be better. That's the point is, you're getting older. Then, your metabolism doesn't work the way it used to.
Joe goes,
you got to make sure.
Blatantly
you
on
have
air.
to take better care of yourself. You have to take better care of yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do. So
God bless you.
Don't health shame me on air. How dare you?
There was no health shaming. There was no health shaming. It was a health empowerment.
They're gonna come for you.
It was a complete empowerment. I raised you up.
Was that
I
what
didn't
it
bring
was?
you down. Yes,
I gotta ask.
It was an
AJ
empowerment.
if he feels like it was empowerment.
All right, let's empower and raise up some of these late round starting pitchers because again, it really goes about into who do you know. And if you don't know some of these names, the next guy knows them. He's going to grab them. So let's go to Tampa first and foremost. They're in a different park now. Remember that, Joe. You brought that to light a couple of weeks ago and start to pound it in. Playing outdoors, humidity, different way to grip the ball. Ball moves differently in different times of the year, different weather. Let's go to Tampa. They can always give you good starting pitching. They'll start 6 guys, it seems. Let's talk about one of them.
Yeah, look, I want to talk about Ryan Pepiot because this was the player that Saris could not stop talking about. And when Saris was in on a pitcher, and we know how great of an analyst he is, and then Nick Pollock's in on a pitcher, I start to perk up and say, okay, let me dive in again to Ryan Pepiot. And when I was writing up the Black Book this year and doing all the pitcher write-ups, Pepiot was another guy that did pop for me too. And I think that when you look at his body of work last year, 26 games, 130 innings, 142 strikeouts, just 48 walks. So he's got a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk rate. That's going to lead to success at the major league level. You don't want to walk guys. It's one of the problems that, Hunter Green had early in his career too, right? Sometimes the control wasn't there. Control is very important. Those guys that have 2-to-1 or even 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratios, those are the guys that are going to have success because they're not going to put runners on. They're not going to put themselves in bad situations more often than not. And I think if you're looking for the silver lining here with this potential, again, 6-man rotation that we're looking at as everything becomes little league in the major leagues here, that Ryan Pepiot probably is set up to be one of the more durable guys, I think, in this rotation. we don't know what Shane Boss is going to be able to give us. I know they've been teasing Rasmussen there too. The problem with Zach Littell is that he is out of options, so there's a good chance that he does at least start the year in this rotation. So Pepio might be a little bit of a patience will be rewarded scenario too. You draft him. If he only makes 3 starts in April, don't get frustrated. And if you didn't draft him, go buy him. But right now, you're getting him at such an incredible discount. He's the 176th player in consensus ADP on Fantasy Pros. That's a tremendous value for a guy who could be pitching on an improved team. The 3-to-1 strikeout to walk rate, a solid ERA, a solid whip. Ryan Pepio could be a really good number 4 or 5 starter for you at an incredible return on investment.
All right, I'm loving it. We're cooking with Joey P. Joe Pisapia, the author of the Fantasy Black Book, talking late round starting pitching. Let's go back to Houston, Joe. We talk about all the time a team needs 3 good starters to really go deep. I think the Astros have it in Valdez, Brown, and this next guy.
Yeah, Spencer Arrighetti, another guy we did a huge deep dive on a couple weeks ago, and we saw what it was in the first few starts and what it was in the second half of the season, how good he was. And the splits were vastly different. And that's what I keep coming back to as well when I'm evaluating Spencer Arrighetti, also going in that similar range, right? Like he is just a guy going at 188 overall. And Spencer Arrighetti, I think, is not going to be a household name necessarily, but he's going to be a guy that could potentially give you, I think, a lot of innings this year, some quality innings at that. He has the upside and the strikeout potential you're looking for as well. 171 strikeouts in just 141 innings. That's something that really should pique your interest. And right now, I think, spring training, you don't worry too much about what you're seeing, what you're not. All you want is health out of him. He's developing a 2-seam fastball this spring too. So that's something he's working on. So if you see him get lit up a little bit, sometimes these guys are just working on stuff, right? Yeah. They don't really care what results are. They care about, I'm getting used to throwing this in at-bats. I'm getting used to how it feels in-game as opposed to in bullpen sessions. So don't get scared off at all about any sort of Spencer Arrighetti stuff in the spring. The cost is still nothing. Now, you like to see that ERA get lower. That I understand too. The ERA was at 4.5. The expected ERA was at 4.05. So a little bit more negotiable, I think, in there. But so much of this was due to the early bad starts of Spencer Arrighetti, where his ERA was just off the charts bad. So by the time it course corrected, no matter how good he was in the second half and the later starts, it was never going to get below 4. But now he's in a situation where I think he is one of the better kept secrets in baseball.
All right, let's go now and spend the rest of our time in the National League Central, starting with the Milwaukee Brewers. And honestly, this is my pick for a team to overachieve. They have a team that's under 30 everywhere in the lineup. That pitching staff's going to be fantastic. When Brandon Woodruff is healthy and he's back, it's going to look like Woodruff, Peralta, Cortez, Savali. Joe, talk about Brandon Woodruff.
Look, when Brandon Woodruff is healthy, he is a fantasy ace, basically. That's what he is. Problem is he hasn't been healthy in a long time, but it's not costing you too much to find out because he's going post 200 in ADP in most leagues. Right now, Brandon Woodruff is at 224. That is an incredible value. Once again, if it doesn't work out and he's hurt again or some issues happen, you cut him. Now, he might not start on time. He's still working his way back. And I think it's smart that the Brewers are taking their time. It's a long season. The Brewers were in the playoffs last year, and they plan on being competitive again this year. So they're playing the long game with Brandon Woodruff, which should also be good, I think, for your long-term fantasy investment in him. But post 200, what do you have to lose? Because the upside is a number 1 or 2 starting pitcher, and those guys don't grow on trees post 200. Another guy, Nick Lodolo, we talked a lot about Hunter Green, but Nick Lodolo, a left-handed pitcher, sometimes those lefties take a little longer in the pressure cooker. He's having a great spring, 8 2/3 innings, 9 strikeouts so far. Keep an eye on Nick Lodolo because this guy, if he's right, could be that number 2 starter in that Reds rotation that really puts them over the top. So Nick Lodolo, circle his name along with Woodruff, Arrighetti, and Pepio this draft season as late round starting pitcher gems. We come back, some bounce backs that I have circled as well.
The game is on. The stakes are high, but the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that rhythm. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of 18.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you here. Joe, it's time now to talk about and continue the theme and trend about starting pitchers, but let's talk about some bounce back pitchers, pitchers that kind of maybe you think are going to come around a little later on. Maybe they are the brunch of pitching this season. Give me a couple of entrees. What am I going to go for here?
Well, look, there's two pitchers coming back from Tommy John that I have just been very aggressive on. And it's because one of them won a Cy Young a couple years ago, and the other one was right in that Cy Young conversation for 2 straight years before getting hurt. So that one is Shane McClanahan, who's already been cleared, who's already been well past his Tommy John window of return because he had his surgery even earlier than the next guy we're going to talk about. But Shane McClanahan is on track and ready to go. And when Shane McClanahan is at his best, this left-handed pitcher is an absolute stud. He's an absolute ace. So the question is, what's the investment on Shane McClanahan this year? And it's a pretty good one, to be honest with you. At 123, the similar pitchers going around there, Justin Steele. Okay, Justin Steele, a pitcher we already talked about in hour one, still a very big fan of his. Right. But the other guys going around here, still Grayson Rodriguez, who's dealing with arm issues. So I'd rather take the guy with a repaired arm than a guy dealing with issues. Adolis Garcia, a nice player, but certainly one that has warts.
You find him elsewhere.
Right, exactly. Spencer Strider, a guy who's still coming back, but is going to miss a couple months.
That has the Acuna
explain this
to it.
Right, but explain this to me. Like, I'm looking at Spencer Strider missing, again, April at least, and that's barring any setbacks, right, or any issues. McClanahan has a much bigger window of recovery. And, yeah, he doesn't pitch on the Braves. I get that. But this guy is going to take the ball opening day. He's going to be the opening day starter already. So Shane McClanahan, for me, I understand why people are hesitant. And sometimes guys come back from Tommy John and struggle a little bit with some of their location. But for me, I look at Shane McClanahan as a really good investment. And for somebody who is looking to draft offense early and often, I'll go take a Blake Snell in the 4th round, then turn around a little later and take a Shane McClanahan. And I think that's a great way to have some upside in your rotation. And the other guy is Sandy Alcantara. Now, Sandy Alcantara already declared the opening day starter. Now, he's got more than a year left on his deal, too. So this is a piece that's going to be very attractive to some teams out there who might be missing somebody at the top of the rotation. Yankees. Excuse me. I think I had something in my throat there. Sorry, I think I'm better now. But yeah, Sandy Alcantara, one of the best pitchers in baseball when he is right. And also through his Tommy John recovery window, looks very sharp this spring. You know, you watch those spring starts and you understand like, hey, this is going really well. So Shane McClanahan and Sandy Alcantara, two guys that have ace potential. We're going outside of the top 100 picks. And Sandy Alcantara is going even further than Shane McClanahan. He is even cheaper. He is all the way at pick 140 overall. That's kind of crazy to me because he's already shown he's healthy. There's a good chance he doesn't finish the season on the Marlins because some contender is going to come knocking and want Sandy Alcantara. So who would you rather have, Sandy Alcantara or Shane McClanahan at their respective values? McClanahan's a little bit more expensive, but a little bit further removed. I want them both, but Matt, where do you stand with these two guys?
I'll talk to you in real time here as a fantasy manager that's just did a few drafts, even though I know it seems silly. McClanahan has fallen into my lap more times than not, and I often had to reach for him once or twice just because I felt that pitching was moving. I like McClanahan. I remember, see, that's the thing. I remember what McClanahan was before he went down. I remember what Jeffrey Springs was. Now he's over in Oakland or Sacramento, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. The thing is you have to have a memory in baseball, especially with wagering and playing fantasy. You can't just go with what the 2025 projections are. They're still human beings. They're still athletes. They still have a body of work. They still have contributed. With Alcantara, I'm with you. I think people stay off because of the offensive ecosystem. I mean, there really is nothing to root for in Miami, sadly. But if all of a sudden Alcantara is I'm making it up, a Yankee or a Met, that's a far different Sandy Alcantara.
Well, I think the other thing to keep in mind with these guys is that what is the ADP next year for them, right? Do you think these guys are both in the top 50? If the answer is yes, then you need to be far more aggressive than the rest of the board is. And, you know, ADP is polling. ADP is a group think. It is a suggestion. It's not the rule. We talked about Gavin Williams going outside the top 200. That's absurd, right? So you take this and you look for the holes. You look for the gems. You look for the guys that, you know, aren't being drafted where they should be. And you start to think about, what does the 2026 board look like when I'm going to draft it? What's the consensus then? And I think Sandy Alcantara and Shane McClanahan are probably going to be in that top 50 discussion. And in which case, they're extreme values this season. We're going to hit a break, but when we return, we are going to start breaking down the central teams of the American League. Who might win it? What are the win totals? We'll tell you when we come back.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that rim. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
Just a little flyer, couple of thoughts. 18.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here during the break, talking about things we like to eat. And I had brought up avocados and granola, and everyone's like, but at the end of the day, it's good for you. And I think that's the American League Central. I think the American League Central is that aisle in the supermarket where it just kind of smells a little, not a bad way. It's just kind of weird food. It's organic. It's whatever. You can make fun of it. Ha. But at the end of the day, this stuff's good for you. And yeah, I understand the supermarket stuff's a little higher price, but here it's not. When you're playing fantasy baseball, you're wagering. The American League Central is like this forgotten wasteland. I just think it's wonderful. Let's talk with the Cleveland Guardians. The big problem with them is they had no one around Jose Ramirez last year. Well, now you're getting a full season of Lane Thomas and Stephen Kwan maturing. And I think if Bazzana and Manzardo and these guys can start to contribute along with this pitching staff, who's going to beat this team in the Central, Joe?
Look, on paper, certainly the bullpen is incredible. Emmanuel Clase coming off a all-world season, a little struggles in the playoffs, but that's what made Mariano so special, right? He was so good in the playoffs in those bigger moments. Saving games in May and June is one thing, saving them in October is another. But if you look at this lineup, it's pretty good. I think what they need is a step forward from a player, and I'm going to talk about Kyle Manzardo, who's having a phenomenal spring right now. This was a player in the Cubs system and got moved to the Guardians system. And now he is going to be either the everyday DH or first baseman. One of those two things are going to happen there. So Carlos Santana brought back in, but Stephen Kwan, a guy that upped his home runs year over year, really made a conscious effort to improve that power. And he did. Went from being a guy in single-digit home runs to 14 home runs last season. Lane Thomas, a player with some power, some speed. The bottom half of this lineup is a little concerning. You lose Josh Naylor in this lineup. It's not as deep. You still have Jose Ramirez, who is all-world MVP caliber guy. The rotation with Gavin Williams, if he can take that step forward, along with Tanner Bybee, I expect Williams to be more like the two. But I still think it's a little thin. What you're hoping is you're getting Shane Bieber back at some point this season towards the end of the year, and he really becomes that guy at the trade deadline you add for the stretch run. And if Bieber comes back and he is healthy and he can be anything close to what he was before the injury, that's another ace. So the Guardians are the favorites in this division, I think, for a reason, and they should be, because that bullpen is so good and the game has changed, right? You don't need dominant starting pitching. You need starting pitching that can get you 5-6 innings, turn around to the bullpen and hand it off to them and let them be dominant. Now, the one thing I will say is year to year, sometimes bullpens can go from being dominant to being less than dominant. They are one of the tougher things in baseball to be consistently good year over year. But if any team can do it, I think the Guardians can. Matt, what do you make of this lineup too? To me, Manzardo is the key. If he takes that step forward, if he shows you what he is giving you in spring training as this is the new Kyle Manzardo, a 30-90 kind of player, then I think they're okay. If they don't get that, the offense does concern me just a bit.
Yeah, because then you move Santana up and you try to protect Ramirez. Otherwise, just pitch around Ramirez. But that's what we were talking about. Is this team had no help aside from Ramirez. Well, now they do, and they have some things coming in the pipeline. And we're talking about, so I grew up Cardinal baseball, if anyone remembers that, kind of mid-'80s. You score a couple of runs, and then you just tighten the screws, and that's the end of it. That's what this Guardians team's going to be. They're not going to be exciting, but from a wagering perspective, look at run lines, look at unders, look at that, just that good fundamental kind of baseball. I guess in football, is it the NFC Central? Is it that smash mouth kind of way? This is what it's going to be here. And it really is going to be 5-6 innings of gray, dreary baseball. Turn it over to the bullpen. You got yourself a win. I don't care what it looks like. Let's go down now and have a little fight. All right, let's have some fun. Kansas City Royals. That's the next team we're going to talk about here. This lineup is Jonathan India, Bobby Witt, Pasquantino, Perez, Massey, Renfroe, Melendez. Is that Michael Garcia, Kyle Isbell? Joe, you take Bobby Witt out of this lineup. No Jack Caglione right now. You take Bobby Witt out of this lineup, and this team is NG, bro. This team's not good. After Reagans, you have Lugo, Waka, Lorenzen, Bubic, and Estevez. Come on, fight me on this, man.
I feel like you're not a fan of the Royals. That's what I'm getting. Is that true?
I don't see it. I just don't see it, though.
If Pasquantino doesn't
hit, you pitch around Witt. Perez is great, but getting old. And then what? What, MJ Melendez?
Look, I think that what you want – look, Reagans is the best pitcher in this division. So you've got that going for you along with Skubal. Like those are the two guys that, are right there neck and neck at the top. So if Lugo and Waka can give you what they even close, like 85% of what they gave you last year, that gives you a little bit more depth than potentially some of these other rotations too. As much as I love the rotation of the Twins in theory, it's still a little theoretical. The Tigers rotation still, again, a little bit more theoretical. Whereas I've seen it with Lugo, I've seen it with Waka. I know how steady they can be. So I like the rotation more than you. The back of the rotation definitely has problems. We could talk about that, but you can fix those problems. If you have the means to the end and you want to move some prospects and finally start to cash in, you can. The middle of this order, though, Pasquantino, Sal Perez, I think that's enough as long as they're on the field. Bobby Witt Jr. is Bobby Witt Jr. is the top of the board for MVP right now with Aaron Judge, right? Those are the guys neck and neck at the top. And I think with good reason. When you have a player this special, if a Jack Caglione can come in and play first base, the problem is, again, the position he plays, right? Does he start to take some balls in the outfield? That way you can keep Pasquantino at first and keep Perez at DH and have somebody else catch. Maybe you want Perez to be catching more this year. Look, they have flexibility there, but Caglione is having a phenomenal spring training. And he was the player that last year when I was doing research going into the draft, Caglione's what they look like. Travis Bazzana was my number 1 overall guy, but Caglione was my number 2. And I think he is going to come quickly here to the major leagues. We mentioned how good the 1,800 OPS in spring. Now, it's only spring training. That's fine. But monitor this guy. Maybe he's not worth drafting, right? Because you're in a 12-team league. But he should be on your watch list. And if he's starting to hit in April and May and AA and AAA, and depending on where they start him off, Caglione is going to come quickly. And I think he's going to eventually get to the big leagues probably sometime in July. And if he does and he hits, that's a difference maker for this Royals team. So I understand your reservations. I'm going to take the other side of this, which is I still think they can be competitive for this division because I think their pitching depth at starter could be better than the Guardians. The bullpen's not as good, but they did bring in Estevez along with Urseg, so they have 2 guys at the back of that bullpen now. We'll see how it shakes out. But, man, having Bobby Witt, arguably the best player in the American League, that certainly helps.
All right, you and I can agree to disagree here. We'll get in separate cars, and we'll drive to Minnesota, land of the AWA. Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, if you know your history, it's where they came from. But the question is with this team, with the Twins, is I think the Twins realize they can't wait for Correa and Buxton and these guys to get healthy. So let's forget about that and look at Matt Wallner and Royce Lewis and so on and so forth. The lineup has some pop. The team knows how to win. They bring in Ty France from Seattle. He can play a multitude of positions. But the rotation, man, the rotation is still really good. Lopez, Ryan, Ober. Then you have Simeon, Woods, Richardson, Chris Paddock. People forget about him. And the bullpen, that bullpen is really, really good. I think even the Twins are better than the Royals. Joe, let's go.
I was waiting for the Nick Bonkwinkle reference, right?
That was too obvious. Nick Bockwinkel.
Okay.
Of course, Nick
Bonkwinkle. Right, yeah, there you go.
No N, just Bockwinkel.
No N. Bockwinkel. Sorry about that.
There you go.
My apologies. Yeah. But look, the Twins are in a really good spot this year. The Twins are always the same thing. Health. Correa never plays a full season. Buxton never plays a full season. Royce Lewis, I can't get him to play a full week sometimes. That's the problem with this Twins lineup. If this Twins lineup plays 100, if those guys each play 120 games, the Twins probably win this division because they have that kind of talent. But you can't count on that. Wallner at the top of this lineup is intriguing to me in this platoon because on the right side of this platoon in terms of games played. Lopez, we mentioned how much we love him. Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, they have, again, the goods to deliver a full good season. Both of them sometimes can be up and down. And then the other guy we're going to talk about, who could be a breakout later in the next segment, could really change the dynamic of this rotation. Duran at the end of this bullpen is terrific. The Twins is about one thing, Matt. It's about health. That's it. If they stay healthy, they could win this thing. But that never happens. We come back. We continue on with more AL Central. The Tigers up next.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen
Just a little
experience.
flyer, couple of
15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt and Joe hanging out, AJ and Jake and all of you, just talking baseball, looking at the American League Central. How do we approach it from a season-long fantasy, from a DFS approach, as well as a straight-up wagering approach? That, to me, is the best part about these conversations. We're landing on the Detroit Tigers now. How are we going to bet on these Tigers? There is all of a sudden a lot of focus on them because they came on hot last season into the postseason. Everyone on to Tariq Skubal. People are high on Kerry Carpenter. Joe, where do you sit on the Tigers here, and how do you think they're going to fare? I really like Reese Olson. He's their SP3. If that's a sleeper from this team, I would offer that. Joe, what do you like?
Yeah, I think Olsen can give you some innings and be pretty decent. Again, a good finish, a guy that picked up off a lot of waiver wires, a guy we talked about on this show. I remember on a waiver wire segment more than once where he just kept floating around there and said, hey, pick up Reese Olson because this Tigers team is really putting things together. And it's been such a long wait for the Tigers to be good. They've had so many years of losing and so little to show for it. Some of the can't-miss guys haven't really hit necessarily, right? We were waiting for Matt Manning. Eventually we got Casey Mize, and Torkelson hasn't been as advertised necessarily. A lot of up and down for him, more down than up, unfortunately. But it is intriguing that the Guardians are, as our producer's pointing out, the third on the board right now for this division. The Tigers are at second at plus 240. The Twins at plus 200, which is laughable. Again, it's like, I mean, if the Twins could stay healthy, you know,
that's a steal.
That never happens. If show it to me one time and then I'll invest in it. I can't get there. But the Tigers, on the other hand, you look at this team, you look at what they have to offer offensively. I think Torres, even though the ballpark factor is not going to be as favorable to him, maybe the ballpark factor of this, the change of scenery and getting out of New York is good for Gleyber Torres. I feel like the Yankee fan base and Gleyber Torres was just not a good mix. And it seemed like he was just constantly under just scrutiny. No matter how good he was, it just didn't matter. And I think getting out of there is good. Kerry Carpenter, a player you mentioned, I really like a lot. And Riley Green, too. These are two very good young outfielders. And you're getting a discount on fantasy drafts on both of them because they play on a small market Detroit Tigers team where people just still aren't aware of how good they can be. And both of them need to put in a full, very good season, I think, for people to start to buy in. But I'm buying in now on the cheap on Carpenter and Green. Torkelson, we'll see. Colt Keith, on the other hand, was moving from second base to first base, bumping Torkelson to DH. Makes this lineup deeper, but Colt Keith is a very strong contributor. He's a guy that's going to give you a decent average. He's going to steal a couple bases. He's going to drive in runs. He's going to hit for some power. I like Colt Keith a lot as a versatile player that can qualify at second, and second isn't very good, but he's going to be playing at first base. So if you're looking for a guy in that middle infield spot late, might I recommend Colt Keith to you? Try the Colt Keith. It's delicious. The chef just got it in. The rest of this lineup, though, is where things kind of fall apart for me. Sweeney, Perez, you have Rogers. Like, it's just not a spot where you want to be. The rotation, too, really good at the top with Skubal. Flaherty, I know you had your issues with Jack Flaherty last year. You kept waiting for the wheels to fall off. Obviously, they did not. He ended up going to the Los Angeles Dodgers, ended up going back to Detroit, which I don't know about you, Matt. I think that's the best case scenario, right? Where you had your big breakout success after years of toiling and wondering in St. Louis, where did the good Jack Flaherty go? Well, he found himself in Detroit, and now he's back there. So now that he's back in Detroit, does that make you want to invest more in Jack Flaherty this season?
I think he's insulated between Skubal and Olsen. I have a cardinal fear, being a Cardinal fan, for those that are new to the show, seeing some of the things that Jack Flaherty has shown on the mound kind of has left me with some mental scars. But now I think he's insulated, and I think he can pitch better. I think he's more mature. I think he can pitch with a different lineup. And depending on what happens with the back end of that bullpen, that's going to really dictate how far these guys go. Again, we're in a time now, especially from a wagering perspective, just look for guys that are going to go 6 and turn it over to a pen. That's it. Give them a quality start, catch a win, get a few Ks along the way. All right, you mentioned despair, and it's a perfect segue into this final team. And as I understand it, our TD Jake is actually a legitimate and admitted Chicago White Sox fan. So let's have this conversation. I don't know any other show out there that's spending any time on the White Sox here. Some young names that came back in some trades, some familiar names as well. But, Joe, what do you say to someone that wants to wager, wants to invest, wants to be on a fantasy side of the White Sox? Where are we looking?
Geez. Is he wearing his Bobby Jenks jersey right now? Is that what he's wearing?
Just school? That, nothing else.
There's a name you haven't thought of in a long time. Right? Remember Bobby Jenks? Remember that guy? What's he doing?
That's well done, Joe. Watching the show and waiting to hear your
baseball names in my brain that will pop up when you say White Sox. Probably got a Mark Burley jersey. That's probably more likely. I would imagine that. It was historically bad last year. Might be historically bad this year, as Jake is.
I got to. Our producer got in our ear and just went 2 minutes, and I'm just like, oh, geez.
Here's the thing. Luis Robert, extreme value because the team is so bad. He is a guy that can hit 30 home runs, steal 25 bases. Those guys are hard to find, and he's coming at a discount. Draft him. That's the only guy that I'm drafting on this team. That's it. It's the only guy that I want to draft on the White Sox. The win total for this team, 51.5, 52.5. I mean, I want to say over because it's so low, but I don't know if I can. I am out on the White Sox completely. I'm sorry. It's that bad. But the good news is this division still has some breakouts and some sleepers in it. The breakout, I already mentioned him, is Kyle Manzardo, who, once again, we talk about the spring training he is having. It has been absolutely spectacular. And I think when you're looking for, post-hype prospects, which is something oftentimes we get, especially guys who bounce around in organizations, right? You started off in one, and then you move to another, like, he was with the Rays and, like, okay, well, that didn't work out. And now we're going to be over with the Cleveland Guardians. I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier about the Cubs. But with Manzardo, you're in a position here where right now in spring, he is showing you maybe he's ready. 412 batting average, 460 OBP, 735 slugging, 3 homers in 34 at-bats. That's the Kyle Manzardo we've been waiting for. And then there's David Festa, who last year came up with the Twins, had 2 awful starts, and then was absolutely fantastic for the rest of his time. Now, will he make that rotation? They're probably going to give Simeon Woods, Richardson, and Paddock the first crack at those 4 and 5 spots. I'd be stashing David Festa because at some point he's just too good to not take over. And I do think he is going to be a guy that by the end of this season, we're going to look back and say, probably one of the guys that was most added that helped people win leagues could be David Festa. More FST. We close things out right after this.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that rhythm. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of thoughts.
15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here. A reminder at SportsGrid, at SportsGrid TV, those are our social media handles. Want to give a big shout out to the family today, man. We had AJ behind the glass, did a fantastic job. Jake on the ones and twos as always. Joey P getting ready for brunch, and all of you. Thank you so much for joining us, and stick around because every single show is just like this and even better. Joe, it's been a fantastic show talking baseball, deep dive into starting pitching, smart draft strategy, what to do, what not to do, when to reach, when not to reach. Talked about some metrics, how to look at some pitchers, looking at walks, looking at FIP against ERA. All this stuff is good. What are 3 things you're looking forward to for this coming week? Because drafts are going to be upon us, my friend.
Yeah, they are. First thing is, obviously, we've got baseball that actually counts. It's not happening here, though. It's happening in Japan. Look, it's going to be really fun because you're going to have 2 starters of Japanese birth going against each other. It's going to be really super exciting here. But it is frustrating because I like my opening day at one time on opening day. I remember we used to have the Sunday night opener. That was fun. You know, and I'm just old man yelling at the clouds. But it's so strange to have 2 weeks before the season start games that count. I have a problem with it. I don't like it. It's too far away from the regular season starting, but whatever. I don't get any say in this, but we'll have real baseball that counts the matter to talk about next week. Also, closer situations. There's still some closer battles going on in these last week or two. Some are just going to be closer by committee, but if you pay attention and you look closely, you'll be able to see where things are starting to break and maybe make some good investments late. Even bad teams are going to win some games. Even the White Sox are going to win 50 or somewhere around there. So chances are those games are going to be close. So it's probably going to be about 25 to 30 save opportunities for somebody. So keep a close eye on some of these battles in the bullpen that are going on because we might get some clarity as we enter spring training here on the depth charts. That's important. Also, probably the most important, the ADP of Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna is still relatively high. I want to see some timetables for those 2 guys this week. That to me is very important. So I want a little bit more clarity before I start drafting these guys with an abundance of when are they coming back? What is the plan with these guys? We've heard some rumors. We've heard this. We've heard that. Ronald Acuna to miss April. How much of May? Spencer Strider to miss April. How much of May? We'll see. But when those guys are coming back, really makes an impact because, especially for Spencer Strider, I think his ADP is a little high right now, personally. Curious, Matt, as we were talking about the American League, last year, the Cleveland Guardians, I was just looking at this, they won 92 games. This year, the bar is set at 82.5. Do you think the Guardians have gone backwards 10 games? Because you're getting plus money on the Guardians right now on that over.
No. Run and grab that. That's broken. Because when you said 92, I was thinking, yeah, maybe 89.5, 88. But a lot of times you catch these broken lines. You spend too much time thinking about them. Press that button if you have a few bucks. Press that button for sure. And I was wondering overall, because of your inflections, and we only have a few minutes left here, what would Jiminy Glick think of the overall prospect of the baseball season?
Obscure references. I don't know if I could wake up that early for the games to count. I think if you have them at 4 a.m., I that's not enough time. My face mask overnight hasn't fully set in. I think before I could go on air. One of the great Martin Short characters. Can we just give some love to Martin Short too? Yeah, I know you probably don't watch it because you're watching Bluey and you're watching all of that stuff most of the time. But Only Murders in the Building, very entertaining program, especially if you like Martin Short and Steve Martin, and I do. Very enjoyable program. I think this last season, maybe they're stretching. I think they're at the end of the rope here. But the first 2 seasons of that show, incredibly good. That's the problem. You have success, and they just want you to keep pumping out shows. That's where we are. We're like, Fat Elvis at this point on FST. We're so successful. They just keep going. I hope it. Well, I mean, Matt was doing karate at the break, but, Curious, what is your win total if you were to set it for the Minnesota Twins this season? They were a team last year that won 82 games. What would you set that at?
Again, this is another 88-89 win team. I really think the American League Central is going to be what it always is come down to 2 teams within a game or so, and that's going to be fun. But again, you're going to try to – a lot of money, I think, is going to Kansas City. I think a lot of money is being pumped in there. I stay away from that. I'm looking at Cleveland. I'm looking at Minnesota. Detroit also. That's a very, very fickle offense. And the closer, I'm not so certain.
Win total is 83.5 right now. So
again,
if you think
I would smash that number, as the kids say.
I think the Cleveland one is absolutely broken. And look, I think what we're going to do in 2 weeks, we're going to finish up all the West previews next week. And then the following week, we're going to give you our full takes on all these win totals with all these teams and these awards, because that's where we make our money. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. From Matt, I'm Joe. We'll see you next time, kids.
The game.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line. Only